Hello, and welcome back to ACAN practice for grade 1 of the ACAN listening exam. So here are the directions for part 4. In this part, you will hear an interview. The interview will be followed by 2 questions, number 26 and number 27. For each question, you will have 10 seconds to choose the best answer and mark your answer on your answer sheet. The interview and the questions will be given only once. So this is an interview with Siwan Ren, who is a manager at a large consulting firm in Australia. Today, for the reading, there are 2 different parts, the interviewer and Siwan Ren. Of course, I am one person, but I will be reading both parts. So I will be holding up an A when I'm playing the part of the interviewer, and a B when I'm playing the part of Siwan Ren. So please pay attention. I know it might be confusing, but I'll do my best. Okay, let's start. Hello, Siwan, and welcome to the studio. Thank you very much for having me. So, could you briefly tell us what it is you do? Sure. So my team provides accounting and finance advisory services to chief financial officers and their teams. We work with clients across all industries, but my main focus is on government clients. Right. And so what would you say some of the main challenges are now that you experience in that position as a consultant? Well, there are multiple challenges, like poor data, uncooperative teams, tight time frames. It really depends on the client and the project. We offer such a wide range of services, every project is different, which is a challenge in itself. Right. So, do you find most clients cooperative or receptive to your advice? I guess it really depends on who you're talking to at the client. So generally, the CFO and the more senior managers of the client team are very cooperative and very receptive. So they're usually quite involved in the project themselves, or they've attended progress meetings, or they've reviewed our draft reports. So they've been along for the journey and they're more aware of the basis of our advice. Right, okay. Where we tend to get some pushback is in the more junior levels of the finance team or in the non-finance areas at the client. So, the people who haven't had much exposure to the project, they might be a bit more reluctant to give us their time or to take on some of our suggestions. Many people have an image of government agencies as being very bureaucratic and inefficient. Would you agree? Well, I think it's fair to say the government agencies could be more efficient. But in my experience, a lot of the inefficiencies in government finance teams actually stems from an underinvestment in people and systems. So the finance function is often seen as a non-essential back office support service. So agencies prioritize spending on essential frontline services. For example, a hospital is likely to spend more money on doctors and nurses rather than spend money on, for example, integrating the finance system across 2 locations. So I think efficiency would definitely improve across all of government if agencies made the necessary upgrades to their finance systems and offered more training to upskill their finance staff. What qualities or kinds of skills does someone in your position need to do the job well? I think it's really important to have good interpersonal skills because you need to be able to interact with all levels of the organization, from graduates to executives. Right. Both finance and non-finance personnel who may or may not be willing to give you their time. So you need the skills to be able to overcome any pushback you might encounter and, be able to communicate things in a way that achieves the buy-in that you need. Has the use of high-tech devices been a help or hindrance in your line of work? Technology has made my work environment a lot more flexible, which is great. You know, having the ability to work in the office or at the client site, or even work from home, is something that I find very valuable. But at the same time, it means that you're always connected. And so it's really easy to get caught up in work emails after hours or on the weekends. And yeah, it does become a bit hard to disconnect sometimes. I think we all experience that. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for having me. Questions. Number 26. What is one thing Siwon says about her clients? Answers. 1. She does not usually have to communicate with CFOs and senior managers. 2. They are generally flexible with deadlines on large-scale projects. 3. Staff who are less involved in the project tend to be less cooperative. 4. They frequently misinterpret the report she produces for them. Okay. I know that this was a long interview. It's a lot to remember. It's a lot to take note of, to try and pick out the most important points. So if you go back to the interview toward the middle, so there's a part where Siwon says the CFO and more senior managers are very cooperative, very receptive. So these are the people at the top. They're very involved in what's going on with the project. So they're very receptive, they're cooperative, they're willing to work with Siwon and her team. However, in the next part, she says that the people who haven't had too much exposure to the project, they might be more reluctant to give their time or take on some of their suggestions. So she's saying the people who aren't as involved in the projects are not going to be as receptive, not going to listen as well. So the answer is number 3, which makes sense. If you're not as involved in the project, of course, you might be more willing to push back. You might be less cooperative because you don't have as much of an investment as other people have. Okay, and question 27. What is one thing Siwon says about the finance systems of government agencies? Answers. 1. The agencies rely on their own experts and are reluctant to outsource projects. 2. The agencies are less likely to focus on them than on frontline services. 3. Constant upgrades mean agency staff spend too much time retraining. And 4. Agency staff are highly qualified, but the technology of the systems is outdated. Okay, again, you have to try and remember the most important parts of the interview. Again, this is going back toward the middle of the interview and a lower point than what we just talked about. It's the second question, so that makes sense. So she says, the finance function is often seen as a non-essential back office support system, so agencies prioritize spending on essential frontline services. She then goes on to give the example of a hospital spending more money on doctors and nurses instead of integrating the finance system. So she's talking about how companies are more likely to focus on the things at the front line. So the answer to what is one thing that Siwon says about the finance system is that government agencies are more likely to focus on frontline services. So the answer is the agencies are less likely to focus on them being the finance systems, than on frontline services. The answer is number 2. And with that, we are finished with the practice for grade 1 ACAN listening. Good luck with all 4 of the parts. I know it's a lot. You have to listen to a lot of very fast English with very complicated vocabulary, but I know you can do it. If you have any questions, if you're confused, you can always go back through the videos and listen again. Good luck, and I hope you do well on the test.